the circumstances, we'll have the offering after they talk it. It all began in New Jersey, where I was born. I had an older brother and a younger sister, and I have to say I had an absolutely wonderful childhood because every summer we were shipped up, my brother and I were shipped up to my German grandparents' house. They had a cottage on Lake Apacon. It was right on the shore, and we would be up there swimming and carrying on all the time by ourselves, and then when we got bored with swimming and fishing and so forth, we'd walk a short distance down to an amusement park. We got to know everybody from one end of that amusement park to the other. And as a result of that, we had an exciting, really exciting childhood. I graduated, well, in the summer of 1945, after I had turned 16, I went to work at the Naval Ammunition Depot in Lake Denmark. There was a bunch of young fellows like myself that went there. Our job was to keep the warehouses clean and to keep the grass cut around the warehouses and the railroad. And I graduated in 1946 after playing a lot of sports. And that summer, I ran a merry-go-round at the amusement park. See, I had a lot of talent. And then I had various jobs in construction, like mixing mortar and putting bricks up on scaffolds and running a jackhammer, all kinds of jobs you knew you did not want to do for the rest of your life. So in 1947, I joined the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve for 2 years, and for 2 years we trained at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I also, in 1947, I got a job with Reaction Motors Incorporated, and how I got that job was because my father was a police chief in Denville, and Lovell Lawrence, the president of Reaction Motors, was living there, and they were good friends, and my father said my son needs a job. So I was given a job as a courier driver and a chauffeur. I had a station wagon. I would take executives into the New York airports and pick them up and so forth. It was really interesting. But it was in 1947 that Chuck Yeager broke the speed sound, broke the sound barrier. And in doing so, it was a plane, the LXS-1, which was on the bottom of the B-29 and was dropped. The plane was dropped off at 23,000 feet. He ignited the 4 liquid fuel reaction motor engine, and in a very short time he exceeded 700 miles an hour. That was quite an accomplishment, and I had enjoyed that time in 1947. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, I joined the U.S. Navy for 4 years. And I went to boot camp in Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island. Now that was the coldest I have ever been in my life. The wind would blow off in Narragansett Bay and you'd be frozen. They had a pot-belly stove in the middle of the barracks and we slept in our clothes. It was so cold. But anyway, after completing boot camp there, I had a short leave as I was heading for Jacksonville, Florida. When I went home to Denville, my father met me at the railroad station. I had my sea bag and I walked up to him and I stuck my hand out in a gentlemanly fashion, and he went right by that and grabbed a hold of me and hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. That was the last time I ever tried to shake hands with my father. I then went to Jacksonville, Florida, and after I completed aviation machinist mate school, I was sent to Millington Air Force Base, Naval Base, outside of Memphis. uh, I was going to be there for a short time. But every weekend, that's where I learned about vampire liberty. I go into town in Memphis, and then I would go by the blood bank, give my blood, and get $5. And you put that Band-Aid on your arm, and you wore it very proudly because you want everybody to know you gave your blood. But I was out for the $5 and everybody else. But if you walked around town, you'd see an awful lot of guys with Band-Aids. They had a wonderful USO there where you could get food and you could dance. It was just wonderful. Unfortunately, there was a bar called the Budweiser bar across the street, and that's where the $5 went. In a short period of time, I was shipped to the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas, and that's where I began my baseball career. We were assigned to special services, and we played a lot of teams. For instance, in San Antonio, there was Brooks Army Medical, there was Kelly Air Force Base, Lackland Air Force Base, and Randolph Field. And in Houston, there was Ellington Air Force Base, and a lot of those other bases that we played up in Oklahoma. But a memorable game occurred in Corpus Christi. We went down on the weekend to play the Kings Ranch baseball team. Now, Kings Ranch was 825,000 acres, the largest ranch in the United States at the time. And it encompassed 6 counties south of Corpus Christi. When our bus got on I finally got to the ranch. We traveled inside the ranch maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and then finally we passed a lot of white frame buildings where all the Mexican help lived. And then we came to a beautiful brick stable, and it was absolutely incredible. Across the top of the threshold, the wall there, was the name of Salt. And the Salt was a racehorse that won the Triple Crown in 1946. But we had a memorable game at Kings Ranch. And they were all Mexican players, and the umpires were Mexican. And I was catching, and Marty Higgins was pitching, and this umpire wasn't calling balls and strikes the way I liked it, and I kept telling him about it. All of a sudden, a batter foul-tipped the ball went on my shoulder, hit him in the mask, and he came out from around there and said, I intentionally didn't catch the ball. I told him it was a foul tip. And he said, no, you did this impossible. I said, okay, forget it. I looked back at Marty, and Marty's gesturing to me that he's going to do something. And so Marty Higgins played with the Detroit Clowns before he came in the Navy. They were a barnstorming team, just the same as the House of David. I don't know whether you ever saw the House of David, but they were all bearded fellows. They were religious men, but they were great baseball players. They could never play in a major league because there was a ban against wearing beards. But religiously, they had to wear beards, and they traveled all over the country. They were really good ball players. Well, the Detroit Clowns were one of those barnstorming teams, and their big deal was to go into a town and play a local team and pick up all of the admission prices. And they wore clown uniforms, but they were baseball players. One of the things they did constantly was throw a baseball around their back. And also they would throw a baseball to first base, and the first baseman would go out with his glove like that and then catch the ball off by his chest. And that would always have people wondering how he did that. Well, Marty then turned around and he, in a fluid motion, he wound up and threw that ball around his back, and it came right across the plate. Perfect strike. That Mexican referee umpire went bananas. He said, no, you couldn't do it. We argued that get the rule book out. We'll see if you can't throw the ball around their back. Things continued with that, and everybody got a big kick out of that. But late in the game, I was on first base. I led off the inning with a single. And 2 outs later, I'm standing on second base, and I look in, and Marty's coming to bat. Marty Higgins. Marty nods for me toward first base. I knew what he was doing. He dropped a perfect bunt down the first base line, but he ran to third. And I was on second, and I ran to first. The first baseman picked up the ball. He didn't know what to do with it, so he threw to third base. There's nobody on third base. So anyway, I continued on home, and Marty goes to second base, and the umpire goes absolutely ballistic. He is out there screaming and hollering. I look in the stands. The stands are bent over, laughing, they're crying. Even the players are up. The game was over. We left, and the management told us, "You guys can come back anytime." That was fun. Well, from there I was moved out to the Naval Aviation facility in Alameda, California. And there I got on the baseball team, and again, we played some memorable teams. One weekend we went up to Harrow's Club in Reno to play their baseball team. Well, Harrow's Club provided us all the accommodations, including food and drinks and whatever we wanted, and in addition gave us $20 to play in the casino. Well, I cashed in $10, got $10 worth of nickels, and went to the casino. I walked in, and what do I see? I see a whole string of 70-year-old women playing these one-armed bandits. Not one, but 3 at a time. They're going like this. Well, I stand patiently behind one of those women, and finally she ran out of nickels. So I took my nickels, and when she went to get more, I sat down, just played one machine. And only in a few minutes she's coming back. Just at the same time, I hit the jackpot. Well, you talk about an old woman that was ready to kill me because she claimed that they were all her nickels in that machine. Anyway, I took my winnings and got out of there. We played 2 night games there in Reno and won them both. The most memorable game was when we played at San Quentin. Now that was an experience because to get there, San Quentin was located on the north end of San Francisco Bay. To get there, we had to cross with a bus over the Bay Bridge and then into San Francisco and then over the Golden Gate to get up north to there. When we got there, we were all dressed in our uniforms and had our spikes. We had a duffel bag with our glove and our hat in it and maybe a couple snacks. Well, when you entered the prison, it was a big visitation room there. They opened that door there, and then they locked that door behind you. And then they process you and search you, and then they let you go into the prison. When they opened that door going into the prison, I saw the most beautiful sight I've ever seen in my life. It was a garden with flowers and a fountain, and you couldn't believe how pretty this was. And it was maintained by prisoners in the cell block right there. They happened to be all gay. They were separated from the rest of the prisoners. But anyway, that was the last time I saw anything beautiful in San Quentin. From there we entered the prison yard, which was about 200 yards square. And behind home plate, up on the wall was a barbed wire and a watchtower, and guards walking the wall with rifles. They had stands there that would seat about 2,000 people. 2,000 prisoners is what I meant. And they would cheer in the game. In the game, I got a double, and I'm standing on second base, and the umpire looks at me and says, "Are you all right?" And I said, well, as much as I don't feel comfortable with all these prisoners around here. He said, "Oh, don't worry about it." He said, "I'm getting out in 2 years myself." and he then added, "Oh, by the way, that guy playing third base killed the doctor And I looked back and he was grinning. He knew he had gotten me. And I'm going to tell you the truth. If somebody came up and got a hit then, I was not stopping at those But that was neat. We all were really glad to get back on that bus and head back because it was an experience you would not want to. Incidentally, that prison is old. It was established in 1852. It's the largest prison in California. It's got 4,000 prisoners in it, and that's where the death row is located in California. At the end of 1953, I realized that I only had a year to go on my 4-year enlistment, and I didn't know what I was going to do when I got back home because somebody was going to ask me what ship I was on. And I didn't want to be able to tell them I wasn't on a ship, I was in the Navy. So I decided I want to get on a ship this last year. So I approached our Special Service officer, and at the time the USS Philippine Sea was in dry docks over Hunters Point just across the bay. So I got transferred to that, and I was assigned to the B-4 Division, which was located aft of the hangar deck. At any rate, after coming out of dry docks, we sailed to San Diego, and the Philippine Sea then started its 4th tour of duty in the Pacific. We went from there to Hawaii, docked on Ford Island on the opposite side of where the Oklahoma went down. From there we went on to Yokosuka, Japan. Now Yokosuka, Japan today is the largest U.S. naval establishment in the international field. No other place is as big as that one in Yokosuka, Japan. But while I was there, I bought a 96-piece set of North Taki china, and I shipped it to my mother. She got it, and not one piece was broken. She used it for the next 50 years, and then when she gave up housekeeping, she gave it back to us. So Helen and I used it for the next 20 years. When we came here, we no longer needed that North Taki china, so we were going to give it to our children. No, those people did not want the china they had at home. So now it sits in our daughter Brenda's basement waiting for grandchildren to try to claim it. Unappreciated. At any rate, when we completed that, we went from Yokosuka to Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, there was a Sally Mae Cleaners. This is the truth. They were on sampans all over that harbor, and they had these long poles with scrub brushes on it, and they were scrubbing the side of the aircraft carriers. Sally Mae and her side cleaner. You know why she did it? Because they were allowed to take garbage pails, 55-gallon garbage pails, up to the mess hall, and when you came up to them with a tray, they took whatever meat was left on your thing and put it in one garbage, and all the vegetables in the other, and then they threw away the other. They did that for 3 days, collected it in the garbage, and they carried those garbage cans. Don't ask me where that meat and vegetables went, because I'm sure it fed a lot of Chinese. And the other thing was the fact that sampans filled that whole harbor. If you want to get out to your sampan, you may have to walk over 10 sampans. I guarantee you today there's not a sampan in that harbor. At any rate, we went from there to the Philippines, Subic Bay, Manila, and while we were operating in the South China Sea, the Chinese airplane shot down the Cathay Pacific airliner. Now, Cathay Pacific was the main airline for Hong Kong. And you remember at that time, they were not part of China. They were under a 99-year lease to the British. Anyway, that was quite a thing. So our aircraft carrier being in the area, we sent out search planes the next day looking to see if we could find any survivors. While there, two Chinese planes jumped our planes, and they were shot down by our pilots. One of the pilots happened to be a fellow by the name of Lieutenant Dick Ribble, and he was from my high school back in Mountain Lake. You talk about long, short, how these things can happen. And you know, I think you also know that Ron Gibbons was on that aircraft carrier. He was with a fighter group. And so it's a small world. And so anyway, we completed our tour of duty, and we didn't have a war with China over those two planes, but we were glad to get out of there. And when we sailed back to San Diego, I got off the ship and was very glad to head on home. I got a discharge with hearing disability and went back home. It was the end of December, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, a high school friend. And then we were permitted to take prisoners who would be discharged in the next few months. Could take them off the unit. I would go down and pick up a prisoner at 5 o'clock. He would be wearing civilian clothes. I'd take him to our church. He'd sit down and enjoy a meal and have fellowship with church members. He would then go to a Bible study for a short period, and then we would go back to prison. I always stopped at McDonald's and got him a fudge sundae, which they greatly appreciated. But anyway, I did this with about 10 prisoners, and in all cases, our church was aware of what we were doing, and they were extremely cooperative and worked with us. Well, how did it work out? I have no idea. I think it was good. The chaplain used to say how many of these fellows would, when released, would write back to them and tell them what they were doing. So I hope that system did work. But at any rate, after doing this stuff for 20 years, Helen and I were up to here with volunteer work because we tried every way possible to get others to take over our role, to take over, get somebody else to go and get 100 people to ring the bell, somebody else to go to the prison and write letters to solicit, somebody else to do this, somebody else. So we wanted to get out of that. And you know what? When you leave, somebody else has to get the 100. Somebody else has to do whatever it is you were doing. So we did. We told Brenda we were ready to move, and she came down here. Now, this is really a no-brainer, because both our son and his family live here in Cary, and Brenda and her husband, Jerry, live here in Cary. So she had us come down here, and we looked at Woodland Terrace, we looked at, we looked at Green Anyway, we put in we were on a wait list at Woodland Terrace, and they finally gave us a call. We came down here. The same weekend we sold our house in Asheboro and closed on it. We moved in down here. Now you talk about somebody being really on the ball, and that really worked out well. I can't tell you how much we've enjoyed it here. Helen is the love of my life. She graduated summa cum laude. She's not only smart, but she's a great wife, and I love her dearly. Now I love our family. Our family is sitting back there, and we've got 3 grandchildren. 2 of them are still in college. One is graduated with an engineering degree and is working up in Virginia. But we're very proud of them, and we hope that everything else goes well with them. Now, we have time for a few questions.
Yes, so thank you, Bob. Fascinating. So one question I wanted to ask you relative to that 4 years you spent in the Navy, what would you say the most significant change in your life was relative to your volunteer work in the Navy?
I think I failed to mention that when I got back home after the Navy, 4 years in the Navy, nobody asked me what ship I was on. Nobody. So if you want to know That's probably what you want to ask, isn't it? But, no, it was, I'll tell you, one of the things I have to tell you was most impressive. Our military, you cannot believe, I was awestruck by the fact that the average age on that aircraft carrier of the crew of 3,000 members was something like 20. And I'm thinking, all of these people around here, there's a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds, they're running out there, pulling pilots out of crashed planes, they're running, arming these planes, they're doing all this dangerous stuff, and they're all 19, 18, 19-year-old kids doing it. And it's amazing how much they do, and they do it day in and day out. The only difference between now and then is an aircraft carrier that has 3,000 men, and today aircraft carriers have 5,000 men, and all of them are nuclear powered. They are also all air conditioned. And we didn't have that. I remember in the Philippines, they gave us rice mats, and we went up on the flight deck at night and laid down on the flight deck in our skivvies, and it was so humid and hot. It really was. But we didn't have any air. Now, I don't know how Ron Gibbons, maybe he had air conditioning, and he was above deck. They lived above deck, those officers. The crew lived down below deck.
Okay, well, let's see if anyone else has questions for you, Bob.
Yes.
How did the baseball playing get going, and were you officially part of that as part of your duty?
Yeah, well, you see what happens. I think it was really for PR. They wanted some kind of entertainment for the other players, the other sailors, and you took pride in your being able to beat an Air Force team or so forth. And it was recreation. It was part of the recreation system. So I think that was the main thing about baseball.
So did you volunteer to get that, or did they find you?
Listen, anybody would volunteer to play baseball. That's neat. We were at a training table where you got all of your meals you could have steak every night, just the way you want it cooked. You could have all the ice cream you wanted. There were a few perks to being in special services and playing baseball. And it's like I said, we had some really great fun. Really great fun. I was a good hitter. I played baseball at Tennessee Wesleyan, some of the stuff here. Then I told you about that rocket plane. This is my ID thing when I was driving as a courier driver, and Chuck Yeager, that's the plane he flew, and the rocket engine that was made by the company I worked for. I had a wonderful life. Wonderful life. And I'm going to tell you, life is good. Life is really good. And Helen and I have we've never looked back since the time we came here. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Any more questions?
I just wanted to say, Bob, I knew part of your career, and I think you have a wonderful career and a lot of good experience, and I really admire you for that. But when I leave here, the thing I'm going to tell people when I'm being here is that Bob Jenkins was in San Quentin. Bob Jenkins was in San Quentin.
I've often told people I've done time and gone out on good behavior.
Incidentally, Bob told me I couldn't come because I wasn't his neighbor.
Well, somebody has to entertain and somebody has to fight. And you fought and I entertained. We worked together.
If nobody else is going to ask, will you walk us through the things behind you? Stand up and point that each one of those things behind you. Tell us what they are.
Well, that was where I was recruiting all those.
Microphone.
and the-
Microphone.
And, this was for being a divisional volunteer for the Salvation Army. One year I was a divisional, which was the Southeastern Volunteer for the Salvation Army. This was for the Salvation Army for being the chairman of the board 3 years. This is for being ladies in the church. And this is for, I don't know, for something. Yeah, it's pretty good. And this is the great catcher. This is the great catcher. Notice the Hellcat uniform. I was a Hellcat.
You go squat like that?
No. If I go down, I don't come out. And I can't throw the ball around my back. Okay, we're all finished, and I'm saying so long to all of you folks and all those folks on their watch.
Again, thank you everyone for coming out.